Hi everyone. So I would like to introduce myself first a little bit. I'm Jorge Castaño. I come from Colombia, South America. I've been doing games for 8 years now. I'm the CEO and game designer of Amazing Soul Games. I was part of the one of the game founders incubator batch. And right now, alongside I'm making games, I'm also teaching game design and project management at two of the biggest universities in Colombia. I lived in Japan for a while, and while I was there, I got a really interesting point of view for games and entertainment as a Japanese people see it, or as Eastern countries see the way games were made. And so after that, I began to really study and get deep into the monetization difference between how we do things in the Western countries and how they do things in the Eastern countries. So the way I see games, and especially free-to-play games, is like a combination of three major things. So the first one is how you game design your games, how games are made to work, and how you optimize the monetization, the retention, the engagement, viralization, how everything of that, all of that goes together into a game. How you go to the analytics of the game, so how you do the live operation of the game, is it successful or not, and then how you can pivot from that point onwards in terms of how the audience of your games is doing in any given country at any given time. And the third aspect, it's about the market, and this is really important. It's one of the main topics I will talk about in the next few minutes, because people don't realize that there's huge difference in the markets and huge difference what people like in some countries and they don't like in others. And it doesn't mean that if a game is successful in a given market, it's going to be successful in any other market because of different dozen different things. So to optimize the revenue, to optimize your game, you need a really strong combination of these three things. So two things I'm gonna focus on this one. I'm not going to go into analytics because I think I just have 15 minutes on analytics. It's such a big subject that it's worth a couple of hours talking about that. So for this I'm going to talk about more basic stuff, which is marketing and game design in terms of Eastern market. One of the things I talk about to my students a lot is the fact that in the industry, especially in industries like this, we're really romantic, and we all think in terms of how fun it is to play games, so how fun it should be to make games also. And of course it should be, but before that, you have to focus on what's the business behind it. Many of my students and many of younger developers, they're just too focused, or they are just too into the fun of the game, into what do I like, and I want to tell other people that why I am making games. It's a romantic thing, of course, and you should have fun, but it's more about the business behind it. And to know the business, you have of course to know the market. To know the business, you have to know that more than half of the market is right now in Eastern countries. And as a Latin American country that I come from, in Colombia, there are some of those many studios or many people trying to make content for Latin American market. And so the first time I tell them is that you're going to find a really big wall that it's going to be almost impossible to get through, because you're making, for example, some of my students were making a really big game for a TV show of the 80s, a Latin American TV show called El Chavo. I don't know if any of you recognize it. But you know, if you can only get to 4% of the global market, then of course you're gonna undersell your game. So there's no use in spending all those resources into going to a market that will not receive you as you went to. And especially for this talk, I wanted to focus on two different ones, Japan and USA, as they are not the opposite, but they're really, in some terms, they behave so much differently. This was taken from Annie, the top grossing games from last week. And as you can see from the Japanese on the Japanese side, most of them are RPG oriented. So as the latest speaker said, like don't go with an RPG, like don't go to the Eastern market, because there are so many great games with RPG elements, and that's so many much like into them that you're not going to be successful. It's really hard for you to do it, and you will have like a really big expertise in making RPG games, and not just expertise, but you will also need to have really big partners there that will of course help you achieve that. On the other hand, we have the USA market, which is heavily puzzle and strategy oriented. So you have games like Clash of Clans or Clash Royale, or the puzzle games, Homescapes or Candy Crush, and all these games that have been making a fortune of the last years. And this is like something I say a lot is make sure you are in the right market for the game even before you launch it. Like don't link that to luck or to any other different kind of metric. Eastern games are also really anime themed, kind of, instead of Western games that are more like simple in terms of cartoon or in terms of other different art direction that you need to think of before releasing that. And there's a really interesting factor in Japan, for example. Japanese are highly loyal users, different from the Western country, from USA. In USA you have like a really big number of users, but none of them are as loyal as Japanese can be with their games. I'm sorry, I just made a mistake here. The 134 average revenue per user is on, it's on 783? Yes, oh no, it's okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, it was a mistake. But as you can see, the USA market, that's the earth, I'm sorry. The 173 million players, it's in USA. So please just change the numbers between, just for the players and the revenue from Japan and USA. But the important part in this is the average revenue per user. So that's one of the main KPIs, and that's one of the main metrics that you have to see in terms of when you're looking at the market. And as you can see, in Japanese market, $134 average revenue per user in a game is much higher than the USA market. And that's important because then you have games who have been steadily keeping up in the top grossing games. This was taken for May 2016. And as you can see, this was the top 5 games in the world at that time. And Monster Strike and Puzzles and Dragons, which are Japanese games, were in the top 5. And their main market was Japan. Japan has a really loyal base of users. And it's easy to see in the number of average revenue per monthly active users, which is like $6 and $6 for both the Japanese games instead of like 3.5 or even 4.3 in the Game of War, which was really high by that time. So it's really important to know that as soon as you get a Japanese user loyal to your game, you're probably not going to lose him for quite a while. So try to keep that and try to get your retention really high so you can achieve that. The second part is in terms of game design in your game. So there are 4 main metrics that I like to focus on. So the first one is retention. Is how good is your game making, or how are your users coming back to the game after several times. The KPI we use, the mostly used KPI for retention is day 1, day 7, day 28. And this is important because we'll see at the later slide that revenue in the games exponentially go up the more time that users stay in your game. So you want to make sure that users stay in that to the later days so you can monetize them better. The second KPI is engagement. How committed are they to your game? So how much time in terms of content are you giving them daily? So most of the games have an average lifetime of 15 to 25 minutes, depending on the market, of course, and the type of game. But you have to make sure that your users have enough content so they can keep you can keep having a chance to turn them into buyers. How does your game grow in terms of virality? So you have to make sure your K factor is high enough so people can start telling other friends and known people about your game, and you can start organically growing your user base rather than start spending money on CPI, rather than start spending money on advertising, which is really high at the moment. So you want to make sure that your game complies with a good viralization. And the fourth thing I like to focus on is monetization. And the monetization between the two markets it's so much different, and it's not just different in categories, but it's different even in the same categories. RPGs in the Western market monetize so much different than RPGs in the Eastern market in terms of the number of objects that you can buy between those two markets. And the equation is really simple. So you pay for CPI, you pay for advertisement, you then people start playing your game, you retain them, you convert them. Of course, you have a churn rate of people who will go away, but then that turns into revenue, lifetime value for your game. That's, of course, the objective at the end of the business model. One of my mentors in Malaysia was Mike Hines. He's from Amazon, and Mike really made us clear that the objective in the store changes between different kinds of games. But there was like a main topic, and it was about the size of the store you have inside your game. So in a studio done by Amazon, the Amazon App Store, they realized that the bigger the store is, the bigger chances they have to start selling games. And that's something that Japanese or Eastern markets in general do really well. If you compare not only the graphical part of menus, for example, in games, but you also compare the number of objects, the number of swords, hats, staffs, personalization objects, and stuff like that between games in the two markets, you see that the Eastern market have really big stores in terms of what you can get and what you can buy. And of course that turns into a bigger revenue for them. Because I know that Candy Crush monetizes really well and has been doing really good since its time on Facebook. But its simplicity, which is really amazing for the job they have done. But you see that the simplicity of the games appeal to a more Western market instead of the unsimplicity of Eastern market, which is just like their big forte in terms of monetization. And the other thing that I was talking to you earlier is that the price of the in-app purchases go up the longer the user is staying in a game. So you want to make sure that your users stay until day 28 or day 30, because then their in-app purchases will go up even to 60%. So people, if you retain them more time, they as loyal users, they start to spend more money into your game. That's like one of the most important parts of it. So market and game design. One last idea that I wanted to comply with you, it's the fact that Japanese and Eastern countries in general, they do not go into the I'm sorry, they do not go into puzzle and I'm forgetting the word. I'm sorry, puzzle and strategy. I'm sorry. So if you see the difference in the monetization models, in the core loops for both puzzle and strategy, you can see that there is like a single core loop, sometimes a double core loop of gameplay that you can use and then you can monetize. But instead, the Japanese and the Eastern market, they can do like a triple, a quintuple, and sometimes it's such a bigger core that you can monetize so many different ways that's the earning they got from their games. One of the first games that tried to do, or that succeeded in doing an Oriental monetization in the Western country was Marvel's, Caban's Marvel Contest of Heroes. And that was because they put so many core loops into the game that at the end there was so many different ways to monetize the user that the user would keep spending money and spending on the same core loop over and over again. And that's something that Eastern monetization have more years of expertise compared to us in Western countries. That was pretty much it. 15 minutes. Yes. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, just let me know.
Questions, yeah. Please raise your hand if you have some questions there. We've got a mic, Roby, like to speak. Oh, there's one down the front here.
Hi, that was great. That was amazing. Thank you very much. One quick question about data. You were talking about Japan and US. You were talking about average revenue per user, ARPU. So you're saying lifetime average revenue per user would be 135 basically dollars in Japan versus 55. So you're not talking about the average revenue per paying user. You're actually talking about globally a user would spend an average that amount.
Yes,
it feels high. It feels really high for the US.
It's really high, but that's the thing about blue whales in the Eastern countries. That they spend really a lot of money. I remember one of the first games that I really dig into the core loops, kind of study the core gameplay of the game. It was Magic Rush. It's an Eastern game, I think it's from Korea. And I remember Eastern people, Asians, paying up to $3,000 per month on different goods inside the game, which really raises the average, the ARPU for these games in the Eastern country.
Great, thank you. Do you have any more questions? Oh, there's one there. Good.
Hi, thank you for the talk. If you have a game studio that comes to you and asks you, we would like to enter the Japanese market, what would be your piece of advice? Because a lot of companies, I think, have tried, but it's been a very difficult market to penetrate. And I'm Japanese, but I always find it difficult to answer those questions.
For the Japanese market, you should probably go to a publisher. So, for example, we worked with a publisher for one of our games 2 years ago, and it was amazing the job in localization that they did for us. Because I know you can always hire a localization partner in terms of language, but it's not the same. A publisher would probably be your best shot into going into a different market.
Cool. Unless we have anyone with a burning question, I think we'll give Jorge a round of applause there.
Thank you very much.